And tonight on PM Express, 21 dead in 2 days in 3 accidents. This is the peak of it because after all the talking, government visitation of accident scenes, promises and assurances, after we lost similar numbers in March 2019, one would have thought that 2 years on, things would have gotten better. But what do we see? A situation of the gap widening instead of ideally bridging. 21 lives lost in 2 days. It's just too many. Maybe we are not addressing the issue with the energy and anger it deserves. That's why we are revisiting the topic today. Just last week, we discussed how children are deeply affected in these crashes. Well, among the 21 dead is a 6-month-old baby. Something must definitely change. Well, let me share a few statistics with you. Then you will understand why things cannot continue the way they are right now. Because just last weekend alone, in 2 days, we recorded 21 deaths in 3 separate road accidents. And we're asking, why should this happen to us? 2 of the accidents were recorded in the central region and 1 in the eastern region. In the first accident, 2 buses collided at Gomuamampong on Sunday dawn, killing 10 instantly, leaving 26 injured. The second saw 2 persons losing their lives in central region. In the eastern region, 9 persons were confirmed dead in a head-on collision involving a Sprinter Benz bus and a DAF truck at Apedra. 6 women, including 6-month-old baby and 3 males, died on the spot. 7 persons, including a pregnant woman, sustained various injuries with no deaths. This is it. And this is a graph of what has happened through 2010 to 2020, a period of 10 years. And you see that the figures never came down. They kept going up and up. What have we been doing in the last 10 years? We've been talking, I guess, and no action. Because if you look at 2010, 1,986 deaths caused by road accidents. In 2011, 2,199. In 2012, 2,240, and it is climbing like that. In 2013, 1,898. It came a bit down. And then in 2014, 1,836. I think something happened, so it came a little down. In 2015, 1,802. In 2016, it climbed up again, 2,084. In 2017, 1,823. In 2018, 2,020. In 2019, 2,284, and in 2020, 2,589. This is unacceptable. Let's look at the number of persons killed in less than 18 years. Now, from January to May 2021, 168. From January to July 2021, 238. So that gives you 70 deaths in 1 month. Every month, 70 lives are lost. Is this something we should be happy about? In 2021, the accident statistics from January to July says that the number of cases reported, 9,520. Number of persons killed, 1,706. Number of persons injured, 9,299. And the list goes on. Total number of vehicles involved, 16,226. And you look at the vehicle types, private vehicle 6,829, commercial 5,726, motorcycle 3,671. Sometimes we often quick to blame commercial drivers, but if you look at this graph, you see that private vehicles even has more numbers than even commercial vehicles. We need to look at this area as well. Comparing 2020 to 2021, January to July, this is it. In 2020, we had 1,371. In 2021, same period, 1,706. And that is an increase of 24.43%. This is not acceptable. And we're still comparing the injuries, January to July. In 2020, it was 8,199. In 2021, 9,299. That's an increase of 13.42%. And if you look at the number of vehicles involved, we've had a 20.93% increase. Why? Because in 2020, there was 13,418. Fast forward to 2021, and you have 16,226. That's why we're asking the question tonight. Why the incessant crashes? My guests will be seated shortly. Let's reflect after this break. My guest in the studio here is Adakabre Frimpong Manson. He's a general manager of VVIP Buses Transport. And also, I'm grateful for your time. It's been a while. Good to see you. Now, joining me via Zoom is Dr. Senso Jambibi. He is CSRI Director of Building and Roads Research Institute. Kwabena Goja. He's a ranking member on the Roads and Transport Committee and MP for Adaklu constituency. And we'll also be joined by Engineer David Osafo-Adontin, who is Director for Planning and Programming at the National Road Safety Authority. Gentlemen who are joining via Zoom, I'm grateful for your time. Now, let me start in the studio. And I want you, Mr. Adakabre, to take us through the minds of the drivers who are involved in some of these accidents. Because, I mean, you manage the vehicles that they use. They report to you, as a matter of fact. What have they been telling you?
Thank you. Going through the statistics that you gave out, you said non-commercial vehicles had higher number of incidents than commercial vehicles.
Yes.
And then in the commercial vehicle sector, you did not specify as to whether the light trucks or the high occupancy coaches. Yes, I am the general manager for VIP John Transport.
Yes.
And then we manage high occupancy coaches.
Yes.
And
but definitely, I mean, some of your vehicles have been involved in accidents in recent times. And of course, we're talking about drivers in general. I mean, I'm sure what they all go through is the same thing. Or I don't know, it may differ from driver to driver, but at your side, what do they normally report to you as a manager?
First, drivers will talk about stress levels. Stress levels to the extent that there's a lot of congestion on the highway.
Okay.
That you could be following a truck or say a fleet of trucks, 5, 6, 7 on a stretch of a single carriageway.
Okay.
And you would have no way to overtake them than to move with them in slow pace. And then you become stressed to the extent that you wish you, especially at night when it is also raining, then the drivers become very, very stressed. Also, there is the issue of managing the small vehicles who also come on the highway. You would agree that the bus, I would say 3 meters breadth and then 12, 14 meters length. And managing such a coach is not that easy on a single carriageway. The recent incident that involved a smaller vehicle and a VIP coach, you realize that the VIP coach on the way from Kumasi towards Accra, we are having a situation where there's an elevation and the smaller vehicle overtook 2 vehicles simultaneously, a sprinter and a heavy duty. So immediately the bus realizes that there was somebody on the way. Because there was a slight elevation, the coach couldn't see the smaller vehicle coming through.
Yes, and it happens a lot.
And it happens a lot.
It has happened to me before.
Exactly. So immediately the coach driver saw the smaller vehicle. He sought to go onto the hard shoulder, thinking the smaller vehicle would stay on the lane, though it was an illegal, unlawful overtaking that it was undertaking. Yet there was miscommunication where the smaller vehicle couldn't really stay on course and also verged to the left and hit the bus on the headlights. So you realize the bus had 31 passengers, and the bus, in trying to evade the accident, climbed on a small elevation on the side of the road, and then in the end tumbled on the side. So these are some of the challenges that the drivers go through, where a lot of risk on the way, So if you are able to manage it, even at night, one should rather applaud said drivers.
So are you saying that the drivers have no faults at all?
Oh, certainly the drivers would have some fault. But then if we could deal with the challenges, the risk on the highway, there are certain spots on the Accra-Kumasi highway especially, when most of these commercial, I would say the high occupancy coach drivers know such spots. Particular spot from Linda Door towards Apedra Junction, that 22-kilometer route. There's a depression on a bridge on the river Brim. There's that depression. If you are not very careful, what happens is that you go in there, you climb. Even last Saturday, there's an articulator truck on that way. So if you meet that articulator on the night, it's more likely they will move onto your way. And if you are not careful and you say you are going outside of the road, you are going to 60-meter depression into the bed of the river. So these are some of the risks the drivers also go through, especially driving at night.
All right, so let me bring in, and luckily for us, Dr. Senso is with the CSIR. They do a lot of research into this one. Dr. Senso, you've been conducting research in this area. What has your research found?
Thank you very much, Aisha, and good evening to our viewers. I think the statistics are still devastating. And as you pointed out in your preview, we still think some of the parameters, we are not getting them right. We are talking about the 3 E's: enforcement, education, engineering. We are not getting them right. The last one I'll talk about is getting alternative modes of transport, which can take off a lot of the traffic from our roads and thereby mitigating the number of accidents we have on our roads. So basically, there are things that we are still not getting right, and that is what we have to work at.
I want you to break it down for me. If you say there are things we're not getting right, and you talk about the 3 E's, what exactly are we not getting right when it comes to the 3 E's, education, engineering, and the third one?
Let me take education, for example. As we are all aware, a lot of these accidents are as a result of driver behavior. The behavior of motorists take a chunk of the causes that we have on the road accidents we have in Ghana, So you realize that wrong overtaking, overspeeding, drunk driving, all these are contributing heavily to the number of road crashes that we have. And when we talk about this education, they have to know, our drivers should know, that these are things that you don't do on the highways, but they continue to do them. So education is very key. Are they really educated enough to anticipate the oncoming vehicle and even judge the speed at which these vehicles are coming so that they do not overtake? As the gentleman in the studio was talking about, you need to have good judgment so that you know at which particular time you have to overtake. Speeds, overspeeding. If 2 vehicles are traveling at, say, 120 kilometers in opposite direction, and they come into collision head-on, the fatalities would definitely be high. It's very staggering fatalities. As you said, we have a number of private cars involved in accidents, but the fatalities are more in the higher occupancy buses. When we come to engineering, I have said it over and over again, we need to start dualizing our highways. We have to dualize our highways. We are a middle-income country, and we've got to do that. Do you know that from 1991 to 2019, the number of vehicles on our roads have increased by 2,089%. In a space of 28 years, we have an increase of vehicles on our roads, 2,089. So if these vehicles are all on our roads and we do not have an effective road infrastructure, then there's cause for alarm, and these accidents will continue to occur. So we need to dualize our roads and improve them. If you look at the bypasses we have at Nswam and Nkoko, you would realize that accidents on these stretches have reduced significantly. Gone were the days when we had the Potrase in the eastern region, where almost every day there was an accident. Now that these bypasses have come, you realize that these black spots are no more there because we have been able to dualize them and taking the accidents off the accident black spots. So road infrastructure is very key. Enforcement. Enforcement is something that we can do in the short term to curb these accidents. And here, I would wish that the MTTD, for the rest of the months ahead of us, would deploy their men on our roads, all the places that we know that they are black spots, accident-prone areas, where drivers are likely to overspeed and overtake unnecessarily, recklessly. They should deploy their men there to check our drivers so that at least from now to the end of the year, we will be able to mitigate. The enforcement is key. And I've said it over and over again, that we should be able to take the manual way of enforcement and move into technology. Gradually, we should get there and be able to enforce road traffic regulations through the deployment of technology. Alternative modes of transport. I'm happy that government is taking steps to handle this part of the alternative mode of transport using the railway system. It is very key. We need to start moving some of our trucks off the main roads, especially the heavy trucks that transport goods from our ports into the hinterlands across the length and breadth of this country. They are destroying our roads, and they are making driving on our roads uncomfortable and unsafe. So we need to take them away from our roads, and railway system is an alternative. It's the best alternative for us, both passenger and goods. We can offload some of the traffic from our roads so that we can be able to use these roads safely. So we need an integrated, holistic approach. The last one, but not the least, is to improve our healthcare delivery system. Emergency response is very key. When accidents happen, how long does it take for the victims of accidents to get healthcare or to get emergency services?
I'm happy you talk about railway. That conversation is one that we need to have because it's a very big one. That would also help in dealing with some of our issues. Thankfully, Mr. Goja, who is a member of parliament and also the ranking member on the Roads and Transport Committee in Parliament, is on this show. Mr. Goja, your colleague MP for South Dai, Roxanne Dafiamakpo, has hinted of a motion for the House to ensure full implementation of the amendment to the Roads Regulation Act with regards to murder caused by drivers. What does that law say?
Well, good evening to you and good evening to my co-panelists. First of all, I want to say my condolences to our compatriots who have sadly lost their lives in the accidents based on the intro you gave, and also to pray that God himself would heal those who have been injured and who are receiving treatment currently. I think Roxanne is talking about, we changed the National Road Safety Commission to a National Road Safety Authority. And out of that, there's the need for them to come up with a series of regulations to operationalize different aspects of the law we've done for them. Sadly, that hasn't happened. So there may be portions that, before the end of the 7th Parliament, for instance, Honorable, one of our colleagues, brought an amendment to the law that's.
All right, so okay, so Mr. Goja will be joining us shortly because of the challenge we're having. But Mr. Donting is also on. Mr. Donting, that same law that Mr. Goja and his colleague talk about is what upgrades you to an authority, correct?
Sorry, good evening. This is Henry Asmeni, rather. Mr. Dante couldn't join, so I have joined.
Okay, Henry Asmeni, hold on for me there because Mr. Goja is back. Let him make his points, then I'll come to you.
Yes. So can you hear me?
Great.
Yeah. So I'm saying that when we operationalize those parts of the law, it will make it possible for us to hold drivers that are reckless or on the road, and also give impetus to the National Road Safety Authority and MTTD to be able to do some of the monitoring that Doc is talking about. But the final one, which is very important in that particular context, is the funding. If you notice, when we passed that act, the National Road Safety Authority was supposed to go to every district and establish a unit there, recruit the relevant number of people who would be helping the district assemblies do the enforcement of the laws there. As we speak, that didn't happen. And the other one is that we always make some money available to National Road Safety Authority, but that money in terms of quantum and timeliness of release never get to them. So we are basically not empowering those who should do the enforcement, yet we are expecting better results than the previous year. And that is why I feel that we should be realistic about these things. We are just not funding the agencies that would do the enforcement, because I don't see much difference in terms of the Road Safety Act in Ghana and in the UK. It's almost the same thing. If you are driving and you use your phone in London, it's 60 points or 60 pounds or so instantly, and then you can get to 3 or 6 points on your license. But guess what? Members of Parliament, ministers of state, medical doctors, police, journalists, everybody is driving, speaking on the phone, and nobody is able to enforce those basic laws. I don't believe there's anywhere in the world where majority of the roads in that country are dualized. But the enforcement regime is such that even if you are driving on a cottage road, you adhere to the speed limit and how you conduct yourself on the particular road. And don't forget that the law in this country says that you should only overtake a vehicle when it is safe to do so. So the fact that you've been following a truck for the past 30 minutes doesn't mean that, oh, I'm getting frustrated, I'll overtake anyway. No, the law says you should only overtake when it is safe to do so for your own life and for the life of the rest of the people. So I think this conversation is a very big one, and the stakeholders are spread. Parliament has got a stake to play. Doc has got a stake to play. You, the media, are playing your role. And hopefully, if we all play our roles effectively, we should be able to reduce the carnage on our roads.
Now, Mr. Goja, of course, issues of the dual carriageway that you talk about, there are a number of issues that have come to play. The state of our roads, and then some of the people are calling for the roads to be made dual carriage roads. There are a lot of issues that are coming up. You are a member of Parliament. Doesn't some of the issues come up? Don't they come up in your discussion in Parliament?
Well, from where I sit, let me give you an example. The total amount of money in the budget for 2021 for capital investment in roads is 1 billion Ghana cedi. We are told a kilometer of asphalt is about $1 million. You find out how many kilometers you can build with 1 billion Ghana cedi. Anybody who thinks that, okay, from Tema to Aflao, maybe 170 kilometers, Tema to Ho, 165 kilometers thereabout. From Accra to Kumasi, over 200 and something kilometers. Similar distances to Takrady. In effect, we are looking for what? Maybe 1,000 kilometers of dualization of that road. To be frank with you, there's no space in the budget to be able to do that. So whilst we are trying to do that as a long-term intervention, Doc talked about certain things that we can be doing in terms of enforcement and at least maintenance of road. Indeed, some of the accidents are avoidable because the nature of the road, potholes and other things, drivers trying to maneuver and dodge these things, fall into the bush or go into the veer onto the direction of the oncoming vehicle. So if we have our way, the 78,000 kilometers of road we talked about, if we have our way, half of them will be dualized. But is it realistic to think that tomorrow morning the road minister is going to announce that we are dualizing all these major roads? I don't think it's realistic.
How about malfunctioning traffic lights, lack of footbridges, and then the bad roads? Is it also something that cannot be fixed?
Well, when you listen to Doc there are three major things that happen on the road to make the road unsafe. One is the incompetent or a driver misbehaving, it could also be that what your guests in the studios talked about, tiredness and all, driving under influence and wrong maneuvers and everything. And then the other one is the road infrastructure itself. What is the nature of this road? The alignment of the road and everything. And the third one, in my view, is actually the condition of the vehicle. Some people never even step to a mechanical workshop until they see a part of the vehicle making a noise. But if you are able to do all these things, drive within the limit, the limit. You know, I hear people talk about my car can do 200. I keep even asking car manufacturers. In many countries, in Ghana, 100 kilometers is the maximum you can do. But your car can do 200 kilometers. So what is the point of doing a car that can do 250 kilometers or so when the speed limit is there? So many people basically don't respect the speed limit. In a residential area, what is the limit? In fact, is that road signage even existent in that area? All these things are things that are missing. That is why I think your question is very valid. Do we have all those things, including the enforcement regime, the road furniture, other things? On many roads, we don't have them. Street light. In fact, there was a project recently that we needed to pilot, which is the Accra Intelligent Traffic Unit. Basically, what that project is supposed to do, starting from Accra, is to harmonize all street lights, all the, all the traffic lights in Accra. So for instance, when it's 5 o'clock and the heaviest traffic is from, let's say, on the ring road going towards the Accra Mall, then somebody in the control room knows that this is what is happening. So he could decide to make a green faster so that a lot of cars will go through and then maybe even give the direction. That project is currently ongoing. I don't know how far it's gone, but those are some of the ways you can use to do this. And the lighting on some of the ways. Up to today, we can't even get the light on the Accra Tema motorway working. You see contractors install it 6 months, cars drive into them, then it goes off. People get to steal the cables and other things. So it's complicated, but we have to start from somewhere. And that where we are starting from is the conversation. And then hopefully government play their part, the citizenry play their part, but enforcement must work. If I get caught driving using my phone, the law shouldn't spare me. The same applies to you, but if I see the policeman driving on the phone, I see the minister, the MP, the journalist, the doctor, they're my friend in the studio. So who exactly is supposed to enforce this law? If we enforce them, I am sure it will reduce the carnage on the road whilst we look for the long-term things, including the trains and other things that we talked about, which I think they are all important and valid points.
Okay. So, Henry Asmani, just give me a minute there. Let me bring in Mr. Dakabri. Mr. Dakabri, there's a research that is saying that we should begin to deal with, because Mr. Goja has also spoken about law enforcement, we should begin to deal with car owners and not the drivers. That is the only way things will work out. I mean, how does this come across to you?
Perhaps I may want to ask, to which purpose would you want to deal with car owners? Who was in charge of the motor vehicle at the time of the incident? And then in having to enforce...
Because, for instance, if the car is faulty, it is the car owner's duty to fix the car. If there are issues with the car itself, it is the duty of the car owner to deal with it. So if they don't deal with it and the driver goes on to crash, then probably is the car owner who should bear the brunt.
Oh, it's not that simple as you put it.
Okay.
If a commercial vehicle comes on scale, ready to move, it's a mechanical thing. So you can't tell at the time the vehicle has been passed fit as roadworthy to travel on the highways. How would a car owner know, how would a bus owner know whether it is mechanically unfit to be on the highway? I believe there are areas we should be looking at. When the honorable member was making a point, he talked about MPs, he talked about road safety, he talked about the media. One area we tend to forget are the operators. How many of the times do you hear operators being asked, what is it that they can do? They go through a lot of challenges, as I said earlier. Today, in a circuit court here in Ghana, the driver of the motor vehicle, the high occupancy coach, that was involved in an accident through which, unfortunately, the musician Ebony died. The driver is mounting the box as a prosecution witness to the state, to assist the state to know in exact what had happened that led to the death of Ebony. But we are not even told about it. And the person who put the heap of sand on the highway has not been charged with any offense. But the driver who jumped the heap and then hit the high occupancy coach, that driver is being prosecuted for careless and dangerous driving. Why are we not saying anything to the person who put a heap of sand on the highway? So we tend to put pressure on drivers without necessarily doing things that could help ease the kind of stress that the drivers go through. It's quite gratifying to note the engineer from BRRI was making a point about engineering. So far, nobody wants to talk, as Goja was saying, that we do not have realistically the money to build dual carriageways. It's just about 13 years ago, John Kufuor left the scene as president. He had dualized parts of the Kumasi Highway. If for every 1 year we had done 10 kilometers or 10 miles of that highway, we would have done 130 miles. So we are not taking into consideration what is it that we've done. Go back and do the research and see how many of such accidents happen on dual carriageways. Most of the time, the high death tolls relates to head-on collision. So we should begin to think about what we can do to dualize our roads and reduce accidents and make sure dealing with the congestion on the highways, something is done about it. Other than that, MP, he doesn't drive a motor coach. So he doesn't know the kind of congestion on the highway. Other than that, they'll be talking about it.
But he's been going to his constituency.
But the congestion on the highways, try it. Try it. Let's do a research on it and see how the roads are congested. And you would not put a single carriageway and expect thousands of motor vehicles. Where on this earth would you see about 10 articulated trucks over 15 meters with 24 others on your road, 10 of them, and then you stay behind such, and passengers will be putting pressure on you. We need to get to Kumasi 5 hours. We need to get to Kumasi 5 hours.
So you have to overtake?
No. That is where the passengers also tend to pick a quarrel with the drivers. When the drivers are so reluctant to overtake danger, because the driver, don't forget the coach has the engine at the rear. So the front of the coach, there are no things to block. So whenever a driver of a high occupancy coach is involved in an accident, you could be thinking about your legs. It will be amputated if you don't die. So the drivers are also careful. They are also family men and women. They would not overtake unnecessarily. But we would also urge passengers not to think that there is a number of hours you could travel from Accra to Ho, number of hours you could travel from Accra to Cape Coast. We should be hesitant, and then we should begin to do something about having to rate our roads of that congestion I'm talking about.
Of course. So all of us have a bit of blame to take in all of this. Again, Dr. Asensu talked about the 3 E's: education, the enforcement, and the engineering. The National Road Safety Authority has been doing that. And recently, that law that Mr. Goja spoke about is the one that actually widened their mandate to make it an authority. Mr. Asumeni is representing Mr. Adonte. Mr. Asumeni, what do you seek to do differently? Because it's obvious the usual is not working.
Thank you very much, and good evening to our viewers. And I would also want to sympathize with those who lost their families during this weekend. We call it the Black Earth Weekend. The National Road Safety Commission, that has been enhanced with more powers, as at now called the National Road Safety Authority. This is very true, as Honorable Abuja mentioned. And it is also true that before it can be operationalized, there are some legal legislative instruments that need to be passed by Parliament. And these legislative instruments I'm talking about, these regulations need to go through procedure. You can't just do these regulations and send it to Parliament to be passed. You need to consult stakeholders. And we all know that when it comes to road safety, stakeholders are large, including even the media. And we have done a lot of these engagements. We are actually at a tail end where very soon these regulations will be laid in Parliament. So very soon you would hear the LI that will be operationalized, the NRSA Act 993 being laid in Parliament. And what does these regulations seek to do? These regulations seek to, one, enforce compliance when it comes to road safety issues. Dr. Asenso spoke about the engineering, some of the engineering on our roads. Yes, these are things that when the LI comes into play, we would have to ensure that engineers comply with their own standards when they are doing these roads. We also spoke about the road transport, where Mr. Adakabre was talking about the vehicle owners. Yes, within this new mandate of the National Road Safety Authority, we have to be regulating the road transport sector, the commercial road transport sector. But we cannot do it without this the regulations coming into play. As I said, if he will tell you, we have actually consulted them and many other transport owners, and they have given us their views. We have consulted them, come up with a realistic regulation that can help all of us when it comes to these matters. So Mr. Dakwe is very aware of these regulations that will be laid in Parliament very, very soon. And as I said, you will be hearing of it very soon in Parliament, when as soon as it is passed, because we already know what is in the law, we have already started preparing ourselves for when the regulations are passed. So when it is passed, it won't be like we have to go and prepare. We are already prepared for our mandate to take off.
All right, I'll take a break on PM Express. When I return, we'll be looking at how to resolve this. We've had this conversation over and over again, but the numbers keep rising and many people losing their lives. We've been able to admit this evening that passengers play a part in this whole thing. Drivers play a part. Enforcement agencies, they are also to be blamed for all of this. What is the responsibility for each and every one of us to ensure that this stops on our roads? Stay with me. Welcome back to PM Express. We're having that bigger conversation about how to stop the road accidents because it's killing too many lives. Let me come to you, Dr. Asenso. What should we do, in the immediate to long term?
Immediate term enforcement. I expect the MTTD to help us in this time of crisis to deploy as many people on our roads as possible. Let's try and mitigate the number of accidents we are going to have from now to December. The issue now is in their hands in the short term. Enforcement, it does not require a lot of resources. So that is one. Education will have to go side by side. What we are doing, educating the drivers, showing the documentary that set continues to show to all Ghanaians. Let them be played day in, day out for people to know the gravity of the situation so that we can all be on guard. So education and enforcement can be in the short term. In the medium to long term, let's be looking at the engineering. It's key. Let's be looking at the engineering, improving the road infrastructure and making sure that all the accident black spots are corrected so that we can have safer roads. The alternative modes of transport will help us alleviate the stress on our highways so that we can be comfortable. At least it will mitigate the accidents, no doubt. And I'm happy government has taken the initiative, and I'm aware that Lands Commission has just recently gazetted the Western Corridor, the route alignment for the railway line. I'm also aware the Eastern Railway Line, the feasibility studies are ongoing, the Trans-ECOWAS Railway Line, the Central Spine. We must be bold in these decisions and implement them in the medium to long term so that we can begin to see some relief on our roads. These are important and key issues that we have to take on board.
Mr. Goja, I want to believe you are in this together with your colleague for the swift implementation of the Act as MPs. So How swift is this for you as MPs, considering that our problems with road accidents keep compounding?
Well, first of all, I must say that our colleague from the National Road Safety Commission will notice that, in fact, driving the process to get the commission changed into an authority was actually a huge work we did in Parliament, especially when my former chairman, Honorable Ayepe, was the chairman. And we're expecting that by now the regulations that you're talking about would have been in, because it addresses some of the things. I heard Adakabre talking about why is the driver of the person, the guy who piled the sand in the road not being punished. In fact, all those things come in the regulation. Before the road becomes a road, in the process of construction, you still need to make the road safe, because especially if it's an existing road, it needed to be made safe. I agree largely with what the doc is saying, but I think my friend Adakabre got it wrong. You see, when you listen to Doc, he categorized the engineering and other things as a medium to long term. That is exactly what I'm saying, that to think that all of a sudden we will have all the money to do 1,000 kilometers, it is just not realistic. It is not to say that we don't need it. I'm saying that tomorrow morning, you cannot expect the road minister to say we are dualizing and within 3 years you see 500 kilometers being dualized. But the immediate things we can do now is to enforce what laws we have currently and incrementally increase the budgetary allocation that will see the relevant ministries, that is the road ministry, expand the roads, especially in the areas that we know that are accident prone, go and resolve those ones. And then we can talk about the other thing. But you see, in Ghana, we register more vehicles onto our roads every year. The number of vehicles on the road keep growing. So one of the trends you saw there where the accidents get more, the population of Ghana is not only increasing in terms of human beings, it's also increasing in terms of vehicles. And sadly, it also means that recalcitrant driver numbers are increasing. How do we keep that? Education and enforcement. That is in the short term. So when it comes to the long term, in terms of expanding the road infrastructure and other things, that one could be done immediately. That as soon as we have the money for that, that is to be given. And the combination of rail and other things, another huge problem, the issue. A kilometer of railway, they tell you $4, $5, $6 million. Yes, there's some project going on in Tamatu Pakadam is ongoing. It's supposed to take it all the way to Paga, and then the Western Corridor and other things. But if you notice, we are still building railways based on where we can derive the best benefit in terms of goods. So it is still something that government needs to consider seriously, because it is very capital intensive. There's nowhere in the world that you embark on a major railway project based on only passengers, because passengers, if you go to London Underground, after 9 a.m. in the morning, the trains are running almost empty. But somebody has to pay for it to be them to be running. So if you want to do passenger railway, you must be ready to actually do what we call subsidizing them. So I think we are on the right trajectory so far. We have to deal with today's issue, which is the occurrence of some of the needless ones. I don't believe, I will not hide it. I don't believe that immediately you dualize all the roads, you're going to take off all the bad drivers off the road. A bad driver on the yes, exactly, would do the same thing on drug carriage. After all, the accidents happen on Accra to Mamoto, isn't it?
Mr. Adakabre, so you want the roads to be dualized, and of course, as we've heard from the MP, I mean, that is in the long term. Immediately,
no, medium to long term.
That's medium to long term, but immediately, some of the things that we can do is to educate ourselves and also enforce the laws. You have admitted that sometimes the drivers are also pressured by the passengers to take them to wherever their destination in a hurry. I mean, you are a transport manager. What do you seek to do differently going forward to ensure that your drivers are well educated not to commit some of these errors on the way?
Right. Just before then, I want to say that I totally disagree that dualizing some of our major highways is medium to long term.
Okay.
I said that John Kufuor left the scene in 2009 January, and he had dualized Kwabena Goja Circle up to Apedwan Kwanta, and then he has dualized Nkoko bypass, and he had done Konongo to Kumasi. So in the middle of it, I said if we had done 10 miles every year for the past 13 years that John Kufuor had left, we'll stop that from doing 10 miles every year. We should resolve from today that every year we will do 10 miles of that road, and certainly we should see something. But then what I intend doing, which we have been doing, is that if a driver of VIP transport is involved in an accident and it is adjudged to be his fault, there's a summary dismissal that comes about because we do not want any of our drivers to engage in any reckless, dangerous driving. So the drivers now know that if they are involved in an accident and they are judged, it is adjudged to be their fault, they are sacked from driving any of our buses. We have also started our own training school. Hitherto, we used to have training with other persons, but now we set up our own training school where the drivers have to undergo training, and then you are certified, and it gets to a time that your driver's license would not even be renewed if you had not undergone that training. We know the DVLA is now doing, I would say, a new curriculum. So we tend to incorporate that curriculum in training our drivers to ensure that there's continuous training of the drivers.
And this is a conversation that will continue.
Hello, my name is Evans Mensah, and you can relive all the fun and excitement on Top Story, Newsnight, and of course, Ghana Connect via podcast. All you need to do is to log on to my Joy Online/podcast. Search for your favorite show and relive the moment. Joy 99.7 FM, your radio for discerning listeners.
Joy 99.7.
Hello and welcome to Springboard, your virtual university.